All right, welcome to a new week of math review lessons. For today's date, Monday, April 20th, our goal is to use graphs to represent proportional relationships. So you can see that you're going to be given two graphs with two different questions about those graphs. So let's go ahead and break it down. We're going to use an example question where it says a bike rider cycles 18 miles in 1 hour. So I don't have graph paper, but this is the equivalent of what that might look like. You can imagine those lines through the graph, but basically you can see that for each hour, the bike rider is increasing by 18 miles. So for 1 hour, the bike rider cycles 18 hours, in 2 hours would be 36. In fact, I will put those dots down. In 2 hours, the cycler would go 36 miles, 3 hours, 54 miles, and so on. Looks like I didn't draw my line far enough, but that's okay. We get the picture. So in this graph, obviously there aren't any questions here, but when you answer the questions, it's all going to be based on the graph. So interpreting what these points mean is going to be really important. So first of all, it's important to remember that when we're talking about the coordinate plane or graphs, we have our origin here. And our origin always represents 0, 0. So, which means in 0 hours, the bike rider would cycle 0 miles, which makes sense. So it's important to know always where our graph starts at the origin. It may ask you to interpret certain points. So let's say it asks you to interpret this point, which is my x is 3. Here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis. My x is 3 and my y is 54. So it may ask you, what does this point mean? And at that point, you're going to interpret, okay, what does this first number mean? Well, the first number represents the x-axis, which here is hours. So that means in 3 hours. Then we look at our y value, which is 54. Our y-axis here represents miles. So in 3 hours, the cycler would go 54 miles, is what that would mean. It may ask you to identify the unit rate. Now remember that unit rate is the same as K, our constant of proportionality. And remember that we find K, you should be really good at this by now. K equals Y divided by X. Again, you could also write Y divided by X if you prefer it that way. So our K equals Y divided by X, and that is the same thing as our unit rate. Now remember that unit rate is the rate of 1. So it's blank per 1. So we have to ask ourselves in this question, what type of unit rate are we looking for? A bike rider cycles 18 miles in 1 hour. So the appropriate number to fill in here would be 18 miles per 1, and hopefully you can answer, it's telling us that would represent 1 hour. So our unit rate would be 18 miles per 1 hour. And you can see that this point exactly identifies our unit rate. It may ask you to find K, which is the same as your unit rate. So to test out what your K could be, I would take an ordered pair. Let's stick with 3 and 54. And let's try our equation of Y divided by X. So in this problem, if we do our Y, which is 54, and we divide it by our X, which is 3, we get 18. To test this out, let's try this point. This point, my X is 2, and my Y is 36. If I do Y divided by X, or 36 divided by 2, I also get 18. So you can see that my constant is 18 for this graph. So let's go ahead and write that down. My constant is 18. Some of you might remember the trick. So when you're looking at a graph, you can identify the unit rate or the constant right away by looking at the graph. So our trick here is that when x is 1, the unit rate, or k, is the y. When x is 1, the unit rate, or the constant, is y. So let's look at our graph here. When x is 1, what is y? Well, we can see that y is 18. Is that the same as the constant we found when we did y divided by x? Yes, it is. So that's just a quick trick to remember when you're looking at your graph. When x is 1, y is your unit rate or your constant. Okay, so you're going to see different questions like this in answering your own questions about the two graphs. Good luck.